So, in this part, I'm going to talk to you about something that I think is quite often overlooked, and that would be how to read your textbook properly. Now, what I see quite often as a mistake is people read it like they would read a novel. They sort of just flip through the chapters, and then once they get to the end, they haven't learned much. Now, what this does is gives you a false idea that you're not really even able to learn from the textbook. So, why bother? But this is false. I would say for most people, you can read the textbook and learn from it. The trick, though, is it requires more focus than just reading a novel. You can't just flip through the pages and learn it too easily. So, what I recommend is something called active reading. What active reading is mainly it's taking notes while you're reading. That's the biggest component of it. And what this does is it forces you to focus on what you're reading, because you can't really copy it down too effectively if you don't even pay attention to what you're reading. So there's taking notes, and then there's another nice thing about math textbooks is that they have example problems throughout each chapter, most of the time. So if you solve those example problems, that'd also be part of active learning. Now, on to the second bullet point. The nice thing about mathematics is it all has some sort of logical underpinning. Right? So, what I find happens quite often is maybe you're doing the active reading, but it's not really making sense once you read through the whole thing. So, a big problem with the just doing active reading is that there's no answering the question, why is this true? The way you do that is you stop every few paragraphs and you think to yourself, what is the logic that underpins what I just read? Because that's how math works. It's all logic. It doesn't come from nowhere. So stopping to think about what that logic is helps solidify it. Because you don't necessarily have to just memorize the chapter. A lot of the times, you can forget a big chunk of mathematics, but if you know the logic, you'll still be fine at the end. So, I would definitely focus on the logic and stop every few paragraphs. Figure out what they're trying to tell you about the math logic behind it. On to the third bullet point. Now, I think we've all been in a situation before where we're trying to solve a problem and we found the place in our notes where we were talking about that sort of thing, but it's not giving us the answers we need to solve it. So, what you can do to fix this is at the end of reading, go over your notes. Make sure they all make sense, make sure all the important topics are put in, and this serves a double purpose. The first one is the one I mentioned where it makes sure your notes are complete for when you check later. Because you don't want to flip through 20 or 30 pages of the chapter to find that. If you can just flip through 3 pages of notes to find it. So there's that purpose, but there's also the purpose that it gives you a more solid foundation because you just thought about the same thing twice in a row. So, like, once you, it's like checking your work in a problem. It solidifies that you understand what you just did. As for the last part, what I see quite often is okay, so maybe you've gone through the other 3 bullet points and you're fine, and then you get tired and you just don't want to do any more. But then the next day, a lot of that stuff, even if you've done all the other bullet points, it's very easy for it to slip out of your mind. So, I always recommend solving at least a few problems to make sure you know what you're doing. Because just like with basically every other bullet point, we've all been there where we read something or we hear something or something like that, and then we think to ourselves, "Oh, I understand that. I don't need to test myself on that." Then you run into it, and it doesn't make as much sense as you thought originally. So, try to avoid that by actually testing your knowledge once you're done reading the chapter. And don't wait too long to do that either, because the longer you wait, the more of it can spill out.